Today it will be also an intense day, and we will begin with a first review of what is happening in Europe. And Jorge Torrico, who is the representative of the government in Spain in the EU BIM task group, will show us how we are harmonizing BIM in the European Union. Thank you. Jorge.
Buen día, buenos días, good morning. Bueno, lo primero pedir disculpas.
Well, first of all, I would like to apologize and excuse Adam Matthews because he could not be here today to do this presentation. And I'm going to talk about what is the approach from Europe by a group of public administrations in different European countries, and how to approach the BIM implementation in Europe, applying several principles and common process and methodologies. Of course, it's difficult to think that, or it's difficult to see what the construction sectors in countries as different as Spain and Norway or Lithuania, for instance, have in common. Each country having its own legal framework and also different practices. But on the other hand, this brings us closer, and we have seen that there are some common and shared principles. We are going to see this in the presentation, and we saw several common points and shared visions in what is being done in each country. In the first place, why? What was the motivation, and what's the size of the market that we try to work on? And I have here some figures. I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but you can see that it's really huge quantities in terms of investment and the GDP percentage, jobs, etc. And also the motivation or the drivers for change. The crisis, which is very well known to all of us, the lack of capacity in many cases, professionals who work in the construction sector, resource scarcity, climate change, infrastructures. In many countries, these infrastructures are aging and must be updated continuously, and so on. So all of these factors drive for a change. Also, we saw yesterday, we talked about productivity and digitalization, a very low digitalization level compared to other industrial sectors. And this is something that we all know and we are familiar with that, right? A system divided into different stages. And I think that's applicable to every country. And is this workflow based in silos, right? We don't exchange information, and the information generated in each silo should be enriched and expanded in the later stages. What's the value proposition of BIM? We have defined 3 different areas: economic, environmental, and social. And basically, we've seen an increase in productivity, and we wanted to enhance the position of European industry in international markets. And when talking about the construction sector, if we try to estimate how much can we save, just by saving 1% of the costs would lead to a 12 billion euros saving. So there's plenty of room to act here. So you can translate that to a European level and do the math yourself. Why the public sector? Well, we believe that the public sector should be leading this kind of processes, and we are a non-competitive, transparent and non-discriminating sector in our actions and leading the market through procurement and creating a fertile environment so that BIM can be implemented at a faster pace and more efficiency. We had also the support and the backing of the European directives, especially this one. I'm not going to go through it because I'm sure you already know it. But this directive actually laid out the possibility, the possibility to use BIM or to ask for BIM in public procurement processes. So that would be the context that actually was presented by Adam Matthews last year when the group was at the beginning of its activity. And here on this slide, we see the countries that are member of this group. Spain joined the task group in March, April 2015. After a first meeting with the group, we concluded that the European Commission would back us because all the goals actually can be fit the single market of the EU. And also, since we are at a union, what's the risk of not collaborating among different states? Well, it adds some cost, it may slow the economic growth, it may confuse the market, close other markets and lose competitiveness. And this slide refers to the creation of this EU BIM task group with a very clear mission, which is to deliver greater value for public money, to increase some values that are at the core of public administrations, to make it more open, fair, competitive, and profitable, and also to stimulate innovation and growth. Currently, and we see in this slide, on the slide at the bottom, which is already a panoramic one, and I'm sure that very soon all the members won't even fit in a single picture. Now some Eastern Europe countries are on board, such as Poland, Hungary and the Czech Republic, and more than 24 countries are part of this task group. So this task force actually is very widely represented, and its members have different implementation stages. Finland or Denmark or the UK have already a very wide and long experience in terms of studies done on BIM and BIM implementation. Two other countries that are actually analyzing how to begin with this process. The starting point of the work of the EU BIM task group was a survey done among the member countries. And at the moment of this survey, which was actually about a year ago, there were already 3 national plans, 11 processes in progress, 6 already implementing. And this means that more and more countries are engaging themselves in this kind of processes. and they are already taken measures, and the group helps them and supports them through a guidelines so that all countries apply some common principles, but we also provide them operative support, which is the way to go, what are the next steps to follow, so that we act in a coordinated and harmonized manner. This is a 2-year program. It started in February 2016. It is co-funded, as I said, by the EU Commission, and we share some goals with the Commission, and the task group will conclude its program by the end of this year, with an ultimate goal to create a common framework regarding public procurement. Well, I'm not going to talk much about the why, because it's been already said. Drivers for change, a value proposition of digitalization and BIM, and the value of the development of an aligned BIM within the EU. About the how, I've said that as well. We created this guideline or manual or handbook, strategic handbook, to introduce BIM at an operative level, so that those countries who are joining BIM can find some guidance and support. So that would be basically our how. Regarding the how, there are some questions that we think about and try to answer in this handbook about how to implement BIM as a public client, what's the role of the public sector in the BIM implementation, how, in pilot projects, for instance, the role of the industry and associations and the construction sector overall, international or national standardization bodies, etc. What makes robust and impactful BIM program? And trying to answer to all of these questions, we got to the famous diamond developed by Adam, which includes the 4 main points to be developed in any BIM implementation in Europe, beginning from the bottom, the public leadership as a fundamental pillar, together with the industry, to improve the skills and capacities of the industry, to create this framework, or to build a common collaborative framework, which includes legal and regulatory issues, but also the elaboration of guidelines and handbooks. Basically, anything that may help the industry implement this methodology. We've been talking about this quite a lot in the past couple of days. Share and all this information with all the agents in the sector. About the what? Well, we thought about what is a BIM project, how we define it, and how do we tender a BIM project. How do you recognize a BIM project when you face one of them? And in this sense, there are manifold visions. Some of them are focused rather on modeling, some others in 3D modeling and other coordination and so on. And to each country, BIM may have different meanings, and also to each user, actually. So we found, as I said, a great number of thoughts and ideas, and we had to harmonize them. So we created this common environment, and we divided it into 4 different disciplines that when we talk about the BIM implementation: people, the process, policies, and of course the technical part. About the timeline, it's established by setting actions on the demand. There were the first actions that were actually adopted in the different EU member states, and we carried out the survey that I mentioned earlier, and that was our starting point of how the different countries that were part of this task group were facing the BIM implementation. Then a profound impact on facilitators, so the ones responsible for the implementation of BIM in public procurement. So it was up to them to make it easier and more simple. Academia, training, associations of the sector, and everything which is related to standards at a national level, to create standards and common references. And finally, we are on the supply, and the industry actors, and also software developers, and so on, with the actions that are listed on the bottom of the slide. We are awaiting now the final publication of this handbook. It will be accompanied by a presentation. It's going to happen around September, October 2017, and that will be the first phase of these works. Finally, I would like to highlight the role of innovation in Europe. What do we have to pursue in order to have a unique digital market? So that would be a concept or a goal by itself. And I believe that innovation is at the disposal of this goal. That will be it, and thank you very much for your attention.